Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording this session for radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Feel free to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to get them answered online. We are particularly pleased to welcome our moderator, Tom Temin, host of the Federal Drive on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Let me turn over the reins to Tom to begin today's discussion.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our guests today are Eric Olson. He's the Director of Enterprise Systems Engineering in the Office of the CIO at the Justice Department. Wolf Tomby, the Chief Technology Officer of Customs and Border Protection. Tom Bayer, the CIO of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Frank Konechny, the CTO in the Office of Information Dominance and CIO at the Air Force. And Lorraine Cleary, Director of Product Management and Network Sales Specialist for Avaya Government Solutions. And before we get to the questions, I just want to set the scene here a little bit for the discussion we're going to be having. Everywhere you look, computing has undergone transformation. Servers have gone virtual. Data centers have consolidated, reconfigured with cool aisles and blade servers. Desktop PCs have given way to mobile devices. Applications have gone from client-server to web to mobile. Yet it all runs largely on the same copper wiring and protocols some of you installed 15, 20, 25 years ago. And that might not be so bad except for the rising costs of maintenance and operational expenses those networks can demand, and also performance issues. And all of this when agencies are under pressure to cut their operating expenses. So we're going to talk about what ties it all together today, and that is the network and the network topologies. So we're going to launch into the first question, kind of go down the line here, and ask what is your network infrastructure situation now, and then we'll get to what you plan for it. But just give us a description, Eric, what Justice Department has.
Sure. First, let me start by saying thanks, Tom, for inviting me to participate on the panel and talk a little bit about how the Department of Justice deals with the telecommunications and networking issue. Let's start by setting a little bit of context. The mission of the Department of Justice is a very highly diverse, geographically dispersed, and I will say complicated mission. And as you can imagine, all of those dynamics drive our telecommunications and network requirements. And let me elaborate a little bit on that. So the mission, as I said, is very diverse. We have components involved with law enforcement, litigation, incarcerations and corrections, grant making, what have you, regulatory. So all told, 40-some component agencies conducting business operations through about 3,000 locations throughout the United States and its territories. And we have well over 100,000 federal employees, contractors, task force members that we need to serve. So it's enormously complex. And the way that we deal with that complexity from a networking perspective, not unlike many federal agencies, is we take a federated approach. So we have a degree of services that are provided from a corporate headquarters shared service perspective, in particular our wide area network. But then we have the individual components who provide, in a more traditional sense, local area, data center network, those kinds of things that more meet their specific mission requirements. And I'll talk more about how we're situated as we go through the panel, because there's a lot to talk about here.
Okay, and Wolf, Customs and Border Protection has a big mission these days, and also people all over the place. Really, you're at all 4 corners of the country. So what are the networking situation? What is your network set up now?
That's actually a great point. So one of the things is we do have also an international presence. So we have personnel now stationed in foreign ports of departure where they're helping to scan things before they even leave that country. So it is a large network. We do have our own WAN internally to CBP, as well as the department, DHS WAN, and a lot of localized local area networks that we're dealing with. So one of the things that I feel is really important is I've been in IT for 28 years now, and a lot of IT people think of the network, if they think of it at all, as more of an afterthought. And I have a fundamentally different view. I think the network is absolutely the foundation for all IT services, because I don't care how great your application is or what kind of cloud you built, how wonderful it is. If there's no network, nobody can get to it. So we have to take a strong look at the network and understand that it's absolutely foundational. The other thing is we're looking at the network in terms of capabilities is it really has to be an end-to-end delivery channel with security and privacy built in. So it has to account for everything from device to destination, and return back to the infrastructure it came from or the application it came from. All that has to be done securely. So our vision for the network really is that it has to be user-centric, because that's where the rubber meets the road, is with the people out in the field. It has to deliver the status of visibility and provisioning and local management along the way, because we have a lot of field support personnel all across the country who are maintaining these networks from a local area network support. So it really is that. And it has to be, again, optimized for security and privacy. It has to promote reliability at all costs. And it has to give the capacities for user access as well as cost savings, because we're still operating under sequestration and we're still operating under budget cuts. So cost is paramount right now.
You could almost be describing a railroad.
Exactly.
In a lot of ways.
In a way.
All right, Lorraine, we're going to get back to you. Frank Konechny of the Air Force, again, organization in flux worldwide. Tell us about your network setup now.
We have several networks, and you got to understand what it is. We have a base network, and that provides all the capabilities of a normal base, which means they have connectivity to social media and everything else as well. Then we also have the WAN, which is the connection of all the bases together across the enterprise and an MPLS mesh type environment where every base can connect to every other base. And we also have, when you go outside the aerial network, which is unique because we have to provide connectivity between the airplanes, the satellites, and the ground stations as well as people on the ground in a warfighting manner.
But do you look at that component and the ground component as one
network?
One network.
We view the space, everything as a total network because they all have to communicate with each other. We also have other side networks like a modeling and simulation network, which is totally separate from the WAN and the base networks, but it's a network that exists out there as well. And there's commercial networks such as the base commissaries and things are existing on their own networks. So there's several networks in the Air Force and in DoD. And the topology is rather different, if you will, because we have to support all sorts of missions.
Tom Baird, Securities and Exchange Commission, another organization that's had a lot of change in the last few years. Tell us about your networking setup now, and we're going to get to what you hope to do with it.
So the Securities and Exchange Commission provides oversight for fair and orderly markets, and we also have the federal financial system that intakes financial filings from corporations all over the world. Any public corporation files with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So we're a little bit different than the other agencies represented here in that we have a presence across the United States, regional offices across the United States, but we also provide a service to customers all over the world, and we serve literally billions of pages of data from our financial filings to people all over the world. And so it's important for us to not only maintain an internal presence and an internal network, but also a network that's efficient and effective in serving up financial data to citizens all over the world. And investors all
right, good. Lorraine from Avaya, what do you see when you look across government? Do you see WANs that are modern, or do you see maybe some potential there?
Well, there's lots of potential always, but to Wolf's point, as far as the way that the networks work, at the end of the day, at its most simple and basic level, it's the device that's in the person's hand or on their desktop talking to an application somewhere. And that data network in between it's been running on the same protocols like you mentioned for the last 15, 20 years. And right now it's becoming the bottleneck because we've had a lot of technological advances on the user side. So you've got iPads now, smartphones, sensors, for every both on the Air Force as well as the CBP, and what happens is though they all have to talk to an application somewhere in the data center, and you've optimized on the data center, so you've brought in virtualization and you've cut down on data centers. Now to fully utilize the capabilities and to keep those OpEx cost savings up is that you need to optimize the network as well. Because to Wolf's point, if you can't get from point A to point B efficiently, and all of these networks are not, they're not prioritized and they're not optimized right now for that. And I know as one of the topics of discussion that we're going to get into is software-defined networking. That is promising to try to optimize and make this mess that we have out there a little more simplified. But there's going to be a lot of challenges with that as well.
All right, so Wolf, since you were mentioned here, why not just buy more bandwidth? Doesn't that solve everything?
Well, no, it won't, because one thing is some of the routers can't handle it, and some of the legacy equipment can't handle it, and it's also very expensive. So I don't necessarily have the money to be able to afford the bandwidth I have today. So I have to get smarter about how I create the network of the future to include that cost savings and that ability to do more with less. And I think there are a number of ways to do that. I do think, as Lorraine mentioned, software-defined networking is a key aspect of that. I think we virtualize everything in the data center. Our clouds are all virtualized capabilities, but the network still remains primarily today a physical network with physical connectivities. We have to go to virtualization on the network. If you look in terms of things like mobility and cloud-based as-a-service offerings, if those offerings are coming in from an external source, let's say I want to consume an office suite from an outside source because it's going to save me money. Can my network handle 60,000 streaming images of an office suite down to the desktops? Today it certainly can't. And if I look at my own private cloud that I have in CBP, that cloud is built to be elastic. So let's assume I'm running an app in it. It's running 50 VMs. There's a major load coming in, something happened, or just increase in trade. So it spins up 50 more VMs to handle that load. If I have to submit a manual change control process to get network access for those 50 VMs, which takes weeks, if not months, I've defeated the whole advantage of an elastic cloud. So we have to get something like SDN in there so that the network can automatically scale up and provision itself while the cloud goes elastic and scales up.
Frank, is that true for the Air Force? I imagine you can't buy unlimited bandwidth, and it sounds like we have a situation where more bandwidth is just a bigger funnel, but all going down to the same tube at the bottom, so it doesn't matter how big the funnel gets.
Right, we have the same situation. And we've been looking at software-defined networking for the data centers as well, because we have the same issues. I mean, it's a question of you can get more cores out there, you get more VMs, but again, you have the processing power, you have to push it out on the network. And we are constrained, really, because as we move toward a more centralized environment, the question becomes, how am I going to move those apps to that environment and get access from all the bases throughout the world? So, I mean, it may be easy to say, oh, everything should be centralized, but the people in Europe don't think that the application should be residing in CONUS in some location on a base someplace. They're very concerned about that, as well as in the Pacific, because they have different landmass connectivity issues. So it's not just move it to a particular core data center or some location. It's look at the network connectivity that's involved and look at it from the viewpoint of, if something happens to the network, how can we still do mission?
Sure. Eric, that probably sounds like what happens at the Justice Department. As you mentioned, there's people all over the world, as well as CONUS. And so it sounds like maybe the goal is to have a LAN-like experience for users, regardless of where the application and data reside, and that's a network function.
That's right. I mean, two of the key drivers that are affecting, what we're doing in the networking space, I'll call it enabling the mobile worker. So we're talking about taking a network edge that was historically, at someone's desktop, and we're talking about extending that to a mobile device, whether it be a tablet or a smartphone. The other aspect of mobile enablement is not just outside the office, but even inside the office. Folks don't want to be tethered to their desk. They want to be able to move around the facility, and that supports, new creative ways of working and collaborating with each other. So we want to do that. So mobile enablement's another big one. On the sort of on the application side of things, as we move more and more to consume platform and application as a service, we need to be able to interconnect with third-party service providers, as Wolf was talking about, in a very highly secure and highly performing manner. And there's much more to it, than just sort of laying a virtual private network over the internet. And I think that in some cases, those service providers that are starting to get more traction in the federal government, are learning that federal agencies, we have some unique requirements in that area.
All right, and Tom, you described an agency that's kind of symmetric in the sense that you've got billions of those XBRL pages coming into Edgar and so forth, the 10.4 filings, and also people seeking the same information going back out. Yeah. So is bandwidth the answer there, or do you have the same situation where, one, you can't afford it, and two, there might be a better way?
So bandwidth is a huge consideration for us. When we receive filings, and if it's a big filing, like for example, an IPO filing from Facebook or Twitter, we can receive 100 million page views in an hour because we get redirects from other news agencies and other places. And so demand goes through the roof very quickly. And what we decided to do is to outsource it to a cloud provider. And that has allowed us to increase our page refresh rates by 300%. And we also reduced our bandwidth costs by 37%. So it not only improved our performance, but it reduced our costs. And it allows us to literally serve users all over the world in sub-second delivery times, which is a huge uplift for our customers. In addition to that, we are seeing a huge move into IP6 and mobile computing, and people want to be able to look at our information both internally and externally from tablets or smartphones, and they want to be able to do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And because it's financial information and it moves markets, people in Hong Kong need to be able to access our site at 4 a.m. our time, and they need to be able to trade on that data. It has to be up, it has to be reliable, and as a result of that, we've seen a huge uplift by moving into the cloud and third-party providers for this.
All right, so some challenging environments. We're going to take a short break right now. Our guests today are Lorraine Cleary. She's the Director of Product Management and Network Sales Specialist for Avaya Government Solutions. Frank Konechny, he's the CTO in the Office of Information Dominance and CIO at the Air Force. Tom Baer is the CIO of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Wolf Tomby is Chief Technology Officer of Customs and Border Protection, and Eric Olson, Director of Enterprise Systems Engineering in the Office of the CIO at the Justice Department. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin, on The Truth About Opex and Software-Defined Networking, sponsored by Avaya Government Solutions, here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com.